Hi, Michael Buffer here, and you are watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan, and this is podcast 28 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. And with me today, I'm delighted to be joined by Montell, Devante, Lowe, all the way from Birmingham. Montell, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Just working, watching my boxing, staying safe. That's all we can do. So yeah.
That's exactly what we like to hear. It looks like it's just you and me today. I mean, I think when you sort of laid the challenge down for Asif the other day, he kind of gave it the big one and is a no-show. No, all jokes aside, just want to wish Asif the best of luck. He's had his hip operation today. Hopefully he'll be rejoining us for future podcasts, and then you and him can have it out of that whole Chris Eubank Jr., Billy Joe Saunders beef that you guys have been going at it for ages. I'm looking forward to that one. Before we get started, just want to remind the viewers out if they haven't already, like, subscribe, and comment. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. Don't forget to give Montell a follow on social media as well. And of course, don't forget to check him out on his Twitter account. We'll share that in our description. Hashtags and views are his own, as it says in his bio of his Twitter account. Before we get started, quick fire question as always. Today's quick fire question, chosen completely by random. If you was a commentator, Montell, you could commentate on any fight, whether it's from the 90s, 80s, 70s, or within the last few years, or the last few weeks, perhaps last weekend. Which one would you go back and commentate on, and why?
Ooh, good question. Well, I don't want to delve too far into the past because I'd say I only started watching boxing like early 2000s. So I want to kind of keep it within my generation, but there has been some cracking fights from the 80s and 90s, which I would have loved to commentate on. But I would have to say, for me, it would be Froch versus Groves at Wembley.
The one where you fought in front of 80,000 people, yeah?
That one there, yeah. And because the needle and the kind of the bad blood leading up to that fight was just unreal. And I think that was the fight that kind of brought boxing back. You know, it brought kind of like that level, that box office type fights back to the UK. And yeah, just the atmosphere, the kind of the build up, everything beautiful. That's what epitomizes British boxing. So yeah, that would be my one.
Do you know what the beauty of that fight was? Obviously, they did it a first time. I actually thought the first fight was probably better than the second fight, but the atmosphere, the occasion, and of course, the rematch of the controversial first fight. Do you know what was the beauty of that fight? Was a few months later, we started university together.
Oh, yeah.
You turned up late on the first day as well. And we got to chill out with Fraggle Rock as well.
I was a lost kid in a new city, man. What can I say?
You turned up, no facial hair, lost as anything, and I'm like, come over here, man. Let the fellow Lutonia look after you. But no, we've never looked back since. Brilliant fight, of course. Cracking way to end that fight as well. Carl Froch proving all of that is wrong. Fight for me, if I could commentate on one fight live, it's a fight I never get bored of watching, is Ward Gatti 1.
Oh.
I mean, that's what I like to call a proper schoolyard fight. Just an absolute war from start to finish. Round 9, Montell, I've probably watched like 50, 60 times.
That is probably one of the best rounds of all time.
100%.
All the time.
100%.
When you look at a fight like that, it blows you away. Back and forth, so many punches, fighters with mad punch resistance, and you kind of look at them fights now and think, wow, they're the fights that take years of careers, really, unfortunately. But this is what we want to see as boxing fans.
I always look at it that styles make fights. Mickey Ward was known as Irish Mickey Ward, was always in thrilling fights, and Arturo Gatti had the heart of a lion, no doubt about it. You know, there was no quitting the guy. And not just once, not twice, but 3 times they went at it, and they were just wars. You feel privileged watching those type of fights, and I don't think you'll ever get a trilogy like that ever again. But wow, that first fight, especially round 9. But yeah, let's move on because we have got quite a bit to talk about today. We're coming off the back of a long, exciting weekend that we've just had in terms of boxing. Not only did Matchroom put on a good show, not only did Showtime put on a good show, but also ESPN and Top Rank did as well. All 3 platforms put on brilliant shows the whole night, and there's just so much to talk about. We obviously start with the whole British scene down at the Wembley Arena, the SSE Arena. Josh Kelly's O has gone, stopped in round 6 by David Avanesyan. Eddie Hearn, for the second time in just over a week, has seen one of his fighters O gone. What was your thoughts on Avanesyan Kelly?
Well, we know from obviously the previous podcast that we did that we kind of mentioned the experience of Avanesyan, but obviously we were hoping that Josh Kelly had the skill set to kind of prevail. But looking at the fight itself, I think we learned a lot about Josh Kelly, and we learned that he's not ready for that type of level yet. You could say as well that he needed some more tune-up fights before we got to that level. And we learned that Avanesyan is a serious contender in this welterweight division. Whether it's fringe world level, whether it's European level, that guy is tough to beat, and he's a hard night's work for anyone. But no kind of qualms with the effort from Josh Kelly, but I just think he was outmanned, outmuscled, and kind of bullied by the more experienced fighter.
What you just said was exactly what I was going to say. Obviously, there's a few more bits I was going to add to it as well. Touching on the whole experience thing, he hadn't fought since, I believe it was December 2019. That's more than a year out of the ring, going into a European title fight. Listen, whoever holds a European title in any division, you know they're a good fighter regardless. Regardless of the fact that Avanesyan's had a few defeats, but he's a durable fighter, he's an experienced fighter. And that experience that he had going into that fight, I said it on podcast 27, was always going to be the deciding factor for me, especially if the fight had gone to the later deep water rounds, as we like to call them in boxing. Now, I've got nothing against Josh Kelly. I think he's an exciting talent. I think, he's had a pretty half-decent career so far. But let's say as it is, he had a middle fight for me on the Joshua Ruiz 1 undercard, and he got a draw out of it. That, for me, told me where Josh Kelly currently is right now. He should have had another 2 or 3 more fights. He should have had a few more fights at British domestic level, and then he should have been pushed. I just look at it and think Eddie Hearn was under a lot of pressure to make that fight happen because it'd been rescheduled, I believe, 3 or 4 times. Yeah. I think the right thing to have done was for Kelly to have fought a British fighter, or perhaps a fighter they knew would give him 6 to 8 rounds, get a knockout, look good, maybe put him in again after that with another warm-up fight, and then push him towards the Avanesyan fight. But I just think it's bad management. And I'm not going to slag Eddie Hearn off, and I'm not going to slag Adam Booth off. They've both done wonderful things for British boxing for many years, probably since you mentioned the Froch Groves fight. They've been 2 names that have really brought the light back to British boxing. But I just think it's bad management, and I just think the timing was all wrong.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But again, like we mention all the time, momentum and how important it is in boxing. And he had no momentum leading up to the fight. And I think what was the key factor was the demand that the fight had. Having it been postponed so many times, I was getting to the point where like I wasn't thinking we was ever going to see the fight. And I was kind of looking at it and thinking, well, if he fights someone else now, then he obviously doesn't want to fight Avanesyan. So I think it's credit, you got to give credit to him for actually, going through with the fight, and obviously not taking any tune-up fights. But now it has a detrimental effect on your career moving forward. Mm-hmm. Now it's like you're going to have to take 5 steps back, start again at domestic level, and try and work your way up again. But there's no doubt he's got the ability, and he'll come back again. He's young, he's hungry, and he's he's fresh, man. So
the ability is there, the management there is there with Eddie Hearn, the trainer is definitely there with Adam Booth. You only look at what he's done with the likes of Groves, David Hay. You know, he's a big figure in terms of boxing trainers in not just in Britain, but you know, he's a big figure all over the world. And I just think it was bad management. I just don't feel that there was any need to rush that fight. I think they should have looked at a couple of warm-up fights. And that's a fight perhaps you could put on an undercard during the summer. I mean, there was no need to rush it. Do you know what? And having said that, I thought the first 3-4 rounds, I thought Kelly started off pretty well. But
yeah,
after the fourth round, he was gone for me. I think he was knackered.
Yeah, he seemed to kind of wilt under the pressure, because you know that Avanesyan is going to keep coming forward, and to keep someone off you with boxing and footwork for 12 rounds with not that much experience is a very, very difficult ask. I think looking back at it, he does have the skill set to do it, but again, like, people are going to mention all the faults now, so they're going to look at the showboating. Because I spoke to a couple of my friends, and you as well, and a lot of people have said, like, he needs to stop that style where he showboats, and he needs to kind of get behind his boxing and start punching. But that's how he fights. That is his style. And I think for a fighter to kind of come away from that style and do something completely different is very hard, because you want to kind of keep that style there, because that's what we love Josh Kelly for. But yeah, again, it's another case of where, when the fighter loses, now we're going to look at the management and how they've been pushed, and have they been moved up through the levels correctly, because this is the lingering, obviously, thoughts with the public now.
You see, for me, I've always said, I know we're going through a whole pandemic, and we probably don't have enough time to sort of nurture these fighters a specific way, where we don't know what the future holds in the sport. And I think, you know, the pressure is now being added to put them in these 50-50 fights, which I can understand. But I've always said it, regardless of what's going on, it's British level, European level, then world level. And I just think the jump above, you know, was just way too quick for him. But as you said, and as I said, he's young, he's talented, he's got a good trainer in his corner, he's got the best promoter in the world. It's not the end of the world. It's an experience, it's a learning experience, and the best fighters, they bounce back from that. You know, I believe there's many fighters that have been in this situation, and I do believe he will bounce back, but I do think there's a lot of things to work on, and I really do think another thing, they have to keep him active this year, because to not fight since December 2019 for a whole year, then come straight into a European title fight with a fighter like Avanesyan, who's looked after by Carl Greaves, who's got a great reputation in boxing. It was just too much for him. And I said the experience will be too much for him on the night. But listen, British fighter, we wish him well. He put up a tweet today saying he's doing good. You know, there's no long-term damage, so let's hopefully he shakes it off, he gets back into the gym, and he can start fighting more actively this year. On that card also was Florian Marku versus Rylan Chalrton. You know, a bit of back and forth leading up to the fight between them two. I will say one thing, Rylan Chalrton's one tough son of a bitch. He really is a tough son of a gun.
Do you not think he looks like a fighter from like a boxing game or something? Like you know those fighters that you create on like a fight night when you're on career mode. He looks like one of those type of guys, but he's tough. He's tough as old boots, man. Definitely. And
he's still done well. I mean, he put Marku down. Whether that was down to Marku's concentration levels dropping or was just a moment of madness, you got to give the guy credit. He hung in there for as long as he could, and I think the corner did in the end, did the right thing in the end. But a bit about Florian Marku, looked after by Sam Jones, again, a great manager coming up in the game. A lot of talent. Boxing wise, I think technically wise, he's very good. He's a character as well. Asif loved the way that he just caught the towel as it come flying into the ring. But Sam Jones said after the fight that he would prefer it if Marku went down or weight into the super lightweight division. From what you've seen from that fight and from what you've seen previously of Florian Marku, where do you think his future lies?
I think his future lies at 140. I think Sam Jones is being very smart with that comment, because he's probably looking at the long-term kind of journey for Marku in the welterweight division. And I always say, I said it the last time we spoke, I think the welterweight division is probably the toughest division to break into at world level. If you're looking at someone like Avanesyan, for example, who is at the European champion, which is a very good bout to hold, and looking at the difficulties you'd have to face beating him, and then moving on to the likes of Porters, Ugases, then you've got your Khans, your Brooks, then you've got your Spencers and your Crawfords. That's when we're talking jumps and jumps and jumps and jumps. So I think from the future point of view, it's probably the best thing for him to do. I think he obviously can make the weight 140 quite easily. He's still fresh, doesn't have a lot of fights under his belt. And I think, again, it will be easier for him to break into world level, and he can do it a lot quicker. But again, his stock has kind of risen because he can talk, he's charismatic, he can box. We've seen he can box. I think his last performance wasn't the best, but this performance, he proved that he's got some power and he can box. And yeah, he's what you want to see, and he's got the fan base as well. So I think I checked his Instagram. I think he's got over 400,000 followers, and obviously, even from Albania, he's got a strong following.
I've been at York Hall on these small hall shows, and I've seen Albanian fighters, and they know how to sell out an arena. York Hall's not the biggest, but these Albanians, they come in numbers. You know how you mentioned about when you talked about the world elite level at 147, you mentioned Spence, you mentioned Crawford, Manny Pacquiao. But then if you look down at super lightweight 140, at the moment, Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez, Regis Prograis, Maurice Hooker still will think he's got a crack in that division. Jack Catterall as well, who's still yet to get his world title shot. Do you think Florian? I know you mentioned at 147, the 147 welterweight division. I completely agree with you. The golfing class is just on a complete another level. Do you think Florian Marku's got what it takes to compete with these guys down at 140 in the super lightweight division?
I think so. I think definitely. I think it is a strong division because we've got obviously Josh Taylor and Ramirez kind of really pushing it and holding the two belts each. But when you look past those fighters, I think you've got guys that are beatable, okay? Whether it's domestically or whether it's kind of fringe world level. I think Prograis, Hooker, they are very good fighters, but I think with someone with momentum and skill, they can be beat, given the right experience. Catterall, and I think he's O'Hara Davis in that.
O'Hara Davis, yeah.
Yeah. I
Sam
think
Maxwell's in that division as well. Sam Maxwell, Robbie Davis Jr., Kay Prosper from Luton, Akeem Emmis Brown. There's good fighters in this division.
There is good fighters, and I think at domestic level he could prevail because looking at obviously Robbie Davis Jr., who I think is a very quality good fighter.
He wasn't at the races on Saturday night, was he?
Yeah, he wasn't. He's on a bit of a losing streak, and someone like him is a good name to have on your resume, and he seemed to be beatable. So I think kind of navigating your way up that division would be the smarter thing to do for Marku, I'd say. Imagine
Florian Marku with his personality against O'Hara Davis with his personality. That would be one brilliant press conference to go to.
That needs to happen. Because you know what it is with O'Hara Davis. Say what you want about him, but he's tough. And he's awkward as hell. Like
there's a talent there. There's a talent there with O'Hara Davis.
And obviously he won the golden contracts. So he's showing us that he's past that domestic level. He can still hang. But obviously you've seen what Josh Taylor's done to him. But yeah, that is a good one. Florian Marku versus O'Hara Davis. I'd
love to see it. I think Eddie Hearn needs to drop us a call and get us to do some matchmaking for him. A guy that made his debut on that exact same card was Johnny Fisher, another one of Sam Jones's fighter. I remember I interviewed Johnny, I think it was about a month ago. Very nice person, down to earth, humble, good fighter as well. A lot of people are making noise about Johnny Fisher. 1-0, can't get excited too quick, but you can only talk about what you saw on the night. Stopped Matt Gordon in the first round. Is this another good, exciting prospect we've got coming up in the heavyweight division, Montell?
Definitely, and I feel like the heavyweight division is bubbling with prospects. I watched that Gordon fight, and I was very impressed with his shot selection and his power. Obviously, you would expect a young heavyweight to kind of roll through someone like Gordon, but if you look at Gordon, he's not the most experienced journeyman, and I think David Adelaide, it took him 3 rounds to get him out of there, whereas it took Fisher only 1. So it's an impressive win for him, and it's kind of like good for the division because that domestic heavyweight scene is amazing, and I think within 10 fights he'll be challenging probably at maybe English level, maybe fringe kind of British level as well. And obviously you've got Adelaide, you've got Gorman, you've got all of these fighters that are obviously kind of trying to make that push up. So it's a really good bubbling division.
And do you know what else the beauty of it is? Sam Jones has got another heavyweight that's going to make his pro debut. A guy from Birmingham, Solomon Dakers. He's due to make his debut on one of these matchroom cards. So as you mentioned, you know, David Adelaide, now Johnny Fisher. Hopefully Solomon Dakers can start off with a good...
Is he going to fight Lovejoy?
No, I don't think the Lovejoy fight will happen. I would have liked to have seen that 19-0 versus 0-0. And then, of course, you've got Fabio Wardley as well.
Yes.
Who was in that division. A very good fighter who fights, who's got a fight coming up soon. So that heavyweight division, domestic scene right now, I think for the next 18 months to 2 years, you've already got kind of like an insight of what fights are going to get made. And look, you know, as we just mentioned, the majority of those names, minus Adelaide and Gorman, who I do believe, I don't know why I can see them fighting this year. These fights, I think that because they would take that fight. Because of what's going on right now in the sport, I think it would happen. David Adelaide said he'd want to fight Nathan Gorman. I don't know whether Nathan Gorman would see it as a, like, you know, like a level down for him. I'm not too sure, because Nathan Gorman, regardless what you think of him, for me, I think he's a very good fighter, and I think, you know, you'll see good things of him this year. But I do think with all these names that we've just mentioned, you've kind of got fights that are more or less making themselves. It's just whether these promoters and these management companies are willing to make them, because we know how boxing works, and unfortunately the fans, i.e. you and me, that pay the $19.99, or if you like Asif doesn't pay and watches it on his dodgy box, we're not getting to see the fights we want to see made. But what can you do about it, eh? Just fingers crossed that we do start getting these 50-50 fights. Let's move on. Let's move over towards top rank. Oscar Valdez became a 2-time world champion, stopping Miguel Berchelt, arguably knockout of the year contender so far. And I mean, I like Berchelt, but I have to say, he got battered. I mean, he took a pasting from Valdez, and you know how he said that the Warrington fight was tough to watch? There were certain parts of that fight that were very tough to watch. I can't think of the words right now, but Oscar Valdez destroyed this guy. I don't know how the fight went on as long it did, but it was just tough to see. But Oscar Valdez, man, the guy's no joke. Still undefeated, 2-time world champion. You know, people are saying that the winner of Herring Frampton will be the king of this division. When from what I've seen, I don't think nobody beats Valdez right now. Not in that division. Absolutely no chance.
He's looking like the real deal, and I think in that fight, I think he was underdog. A lot of boxing experts had him down as the underdog and kind of doubted him in that fight, saying Berchelt was going to knock him out, etc., etc. But if you looked at like the first knockdown, it was like, yeah, you kind of knew that it was going to end badly. And I think it was the third knockdown that kind of ended the fight, wasn't it? And it was brutal. I know we're only 2 months into the year, but that's going to be a tough knockout to beat. And I think now that's kind of like a crowning moment for him now. He's put himself on the world scene. He's put himself on the map. And I think from now, his management team, Reynoso, they'll be doing everything in their power to get him the big fights. I've seen something regarding Devante Davis and Oscar Valdez having a fight. Well, I seen someone put it on Twitter or something like that.
You mentioned Eddie Reynoso. What a stable he's got. You know, Ruiz, Canelo, Ryan Garcia, and obviously Oscar Valdez. you're right. There was something on Twitter, but there was also something else on Twitter. Shakur Stevenson called out Oscar Valdez. Now, Shakur Stevenson for me is one of my most exciting fighters to watch. But again, people ask the question, where's the middle fight? Where's the real test? Why has he not had that test yet? Fair enough, people are going to say that. You know, you can't always please everybody in this sport. But does the Shakur Stevenson fight make sense right now? Do you think it's a fight we need to see? Do you think Andre Ward should be thinking, yep, that's the right fight to take?
Definitely, because Shakur Stevenson needs to be put on the map. And again, making that transition to the casual boxing fans and the UK fans as well, because he is the real deal. And when I look at him and I look at the skill set that he has, the way how he boxes, he's slick, he's defensive, but he hasn't really had that fight to say, I am here. So I think that's the fight that makes sense. And I think he's not one of those guys that's going to badmouth and call out different fighters, and that's just not his style. So that's why I think a lot of fighters are looking at him and think, well, we're not going to fight him. He doesn't really have the brand pull, so to speak, and he's not really known to kind of like the wider audience, and he's going to be difficult to beat. So I think a lot of fighters are kind of a bit wary of the Shakur Stevenson fight. I think Warrington was very wary of that fight because he's probably looking at it and thinking, well, it's not going to make me the money that I would expect, and it's a 50-50 fight. But I would have said that Shakur Stevenson would have wiped the floor with Warrington.
I think, sorry to interrupt you there, Montell. I think what you have to remember is this guy is mentored by Andre Ward as well. So, I mean, being signed with Top Rank is one thing, you know, but to be looked after, mentored, and to be advised by the great Andre Ward is another thing. Look, I mean, I've just said it previously that he's one of my most exciting fighters to watch, but at the same time, you do sort of have to ask the question, and we're not criticizing him, but when is the real test going to be put in front of him? We ask questions about Ryan Garcia. Put him in with a good fighter, someone that's going to test him, someone that's going to, you know, really push him to the limit. And we've seen that with Luke Campbell. And, you know, he proved that as wrong. He got off the canvas and he stopped Luke Campbell, who is not an easy person to stop. Lomachenko didn't do it, but Ryan Garcia did do it. So I think when you have to look at it, right, Oscar Valdez, I believe, is 29-0. I think he's 31 years old. He's a two-time world champion. But again, he's got that experience. He beat a fighter on Saturday night that a lot of people said is not capable of being knocked out. And Oscar Valdez did it with ease. I mean, I watched the whole fight, and Berchelt, I think, probably won about, I gave him 2 rounds on my scorecard.
Yeah.
I just personally think right now with Shakur Stevenson, I think Shakur Stevenson should target the winner of Jamal Herring versus Carl Frampton, because I do think Oscar Valdez right now is the #1 man in the super featherweight division. Carl Frampton has probably not got that long left in his boxing career. Again, an injury has postponed that fight. How many more injuries is he going to pick up? And again, I don't want to criticize someone like Frampton. You know, he's a great fighter, 2-weight world champion. I really would like to see him become a 3-weight world champion, but Jamal Herring is another fighter that's kind of unknown. So we'll get to know a bit more about Jamal Herring. But there's a point I wanted to ask. There's a specific point I wanted to ask you about. You've got 2 good British fighters in this division right now that we've spoken about before, Zelfa Barrett Archie Sharp. Now, when Zelfa signed with Eddie Hearn goes that within a year I want him to be challenging for world titles. I want him to be selling out Manchester arenas. So you know what Eddie Hearn's got planned for him. Archie Sharp, we interview him regularly. He is pushing for the Stevensons, the Oscar Valdez's, the Miguel Berchelts. He even wants the Carl Frampton fight. And Frank Warren said where he's ranked with the WBO, he's not far off a world title shot. From what you've seen from their previous fights, where do you think they can end up getting with these other crop of fighters that they've got to go through first to become world champions?
So I think that's the division again. I think that's the division where the domestic fighters from Britain can break into. So I think looking at Archie Sharp, and I think he's a really skillful, really good fighter. And I think wasn't he supposed to get the Herring fight? Well, wasn't he pushing for that fight?
He was pushing for the Herring and the Frampton fight.
Pushing for that fight, yeah. And I think again, it's just whether these fighters want to kind of take a risk fighting someone like Archie Sharp, because we know he's hungry. We know he's fresh, and he's ready for that world level now. And I think he needs that step up, because I think the fight that he had in lockdown, he kind of struggled to a points decision. And that's because he needs the fights that are going to kind of motivate him. And this is a thing that I always say. If you don't have those fights that are going to test you and motivate you, then you will have these subpar performances. And I think someone like Zelfa Barrett, again, he's highly skilled, got a lot of power as well. And I think moving over to Matchroom, obviously with the view for him to kind of get those world level fights. And I think that fight the other day against Martinez was the perfect fight for him, because you're going to learn so much in those type of fights. It was closer than the judges' scorecards, most definitely. But against someone like Kiko Martinez, who's a former world champion, I believe, is these are the fights that you want. And even if he has a rematch against someone like that, I think that's good for him. But I would like to see them two in together as well.
100%. Yeah, when you said about sorry, Montell, to disturb you. When you said about Archie Sharp, he said the exact same thing on an interview that we did with him. I believe it was just before Christmas. He said what will get him out of bed for his 6 a.m. runs is these fights with the Shakur Stevensons, the Jamal Herrings, and the Carl Framptons. But at the same time, and I'm a big Archie Sharp fan. You've still got to treat every fight as if it's going to be your last fight, as if it is a world title shot. But listen, there are specific fighters in the game right now that probably don't need to be at a certain level to win a certain fight, and he is one of those fighters. But again, you still want him to look good. But 100% with you, I would love to see the Barrett versus Archie Sharp fight. I think that's a perfect fight to make. But the thing with Zelfa Barrett is he's gone over to Matchroom when he was with Frank Warren. I don't think you see that fight being made anytime soon. But
maybe with the view in mind that they can have the fight when one of them becomes world champion, maybe, or because I think a lot of it happened kind of with the Yard and Buatsi. We was looking for the fight, we're begging for it as fans, but then I think a lot of the promoters were like, well, we can wait until one of them gets their hand on the world championship, and then the fight becomes even bigger. So yeah, hopefully that's the case with that fight as well, because I think those two them two in together, the styles. It'll be all action, definitely.
Barrett Sharp, put it on the Fury Joshua undercard.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Fury from Queensbury fighting Joshua from Matchroom.
That's a good shout.
Barrett from Matchroom, Archie Sharp from Queensbury. That card has to be a Matchroom versus a Queensbury show. There's no point Archie Sharp fighting someone from Gummo land, and there's no point Barrett fighting someone from Timbuktu. That whole card is where these promoters sit down and say, right, we've got the 2 best heavyweights in our generation fighting each other. Let's get Williams and Andrade on that same card if we can, Let's even, I don't know, for example, Lyndon Arthur versus Joshua Buatsi. That whole card has to be Matchroom versus Queensbury. I'm hearing that apparently it's going to be $39.99 to order on Sky Box Office. So if it is going to be $39.99 to order on Sky Box Office, it best have a very good undercard to go with it. And you can't get better than rival promotion shows fighting each other on the whole show.
Yeah, but again, this is the issue that we're going to have. The promoters and managers are going to want to protect their fighters. These 50-50 fights essentially take you 10 steps back if you lose. And I think if you look at someone like Archie Sharp and Zelfa Barrett, they've obviously got their own ambitions to be world champions, and I think that could halt their progress. So that's why I don't think it will happen. But I think you are right. That's what we need to see.
100%.
That's what we need to see.
Mate, if we're paying £40 for it, that's exactly what we want to see. Unlike Asif, who's going to watch it on his dodgy box. But look, again, so Shakur Stevenson, 100% you want to see him in the ring with Valdez next.
100%. That's the fight that we need to see next. I feel like that's the testing fight for Shakur. And I think, again, Valdez putting names on his record. I think that Berchelt win was probably his best win. But now with the momentum that he has, he should be kind of looking at the top guys in the division and be trying to knock them off their pedestal.
His legs are gone, Adam. All right, perfect. Now, do you know what? I get where you're coming from, but I think it makes more sense for Stevenson to target the winner of Frampton Herring. And if he does beat the winner of that fight, you've got a unification fight to make there. And that's what we want to see, is unification / undisputed clashes. Final topic of the podcast. Otto Wallin defeats Dominic Breazeale by unanimous decision. Sorry, not the final topic of the podcast. It's one of the last 2 topics. You know what? I'm gonna say this, right? Otto Wallin for me is going to be the bogeyman of this division, but I'm not saying it based on what I saw Saturday night. I'm saying it what I saw based on in the summer of 2019 when he took Tyson Fury 12 rounds and he caused Tyson Fury problems. And for me, I've got Tyson Fury down as the best heavyweight in the world right now. This guy is going to cause people problems. He's got the most awkwardest style, and Breazeale couldn't lace a glove on him on Saturday night. And I'm just looking at Dominic Breazeale. He fought for a world title twice. You've been given another route back in against a good, credible, durable opponent, and he stunk the place out. I don't want to sound. I'm just going to say as it is. He stunk the place out. It's just not good enough.
It's not good. It's not good enough. It's time to go. Now listen, the thing with Breazeale now, he's made a transition to a gatekeeper, okay? And for upcoming heavyweight boxers, that would be a very good name to have on your resume, okay? So for someone like Daniel Dubois, maybe, someone like him to fight someone like Breazeale would be very good, because I feel like now there's no chance of him really winning a world title. But kind of, as you mentioned with the fight, him against Otto Wallin, yeah, he did stink the place out. Couldn't really land much. He was getting caught clean by Otto Wallin, who's not the biggest puncher, by the way, but he's got a high volume and he's durable and he's very awkward as well. But again, he's another person on the another boxer that would be very difficult to beat. And I think when we kind of look at him on Tyson Fury's record and we see how the fight went, and we would have expected that Fury would have just wiped the floor with someone like Wallin, because not many people knew who he was before the fight, but he has got amateur pedigree, and he's a good fighter as well. So anyone that beats him now is going to be looked at and saying, well, you're a serious player in the heavyweight division, because he's good, but I'm not sure where he can go in regards to kind of fighting for world titles yet. But he's definitely a top 15 guy, maybe a top 10 guy now.
You know, Otto Wallin, right? When he fought Tyson Fury suffered a massive cut. I don't know whether it was the left or the right eye. Now, because obviously we follow all the fights, we follow all the social medias, especially Twitter. A lot of people said that fight should have been stopped, and had it gone to the scorecards, Otto Wallin would have been given the decision. Do you know if that happened, how the landscape of the division would be right now? We wouldn't be talking about Fury versus Joshua right now. We'd probably still have Deontay Wilder as the WBC champion. We'd probably be talking about Joshua versus Wilder right now. And that was the night where John Fury, who was in the BT Sports studios that night, said that's the night where Tyson Fury needs to make changes to his backroom staff, and he did. Fair play to him, and it paid off. But this Otto Wallin guy, I just look at him and I just think, if I'm a trainer right now, or I'm a manager and I've got a good heavyweight who's 18-0 and I've just been offered the fight, I'd be thinking, this guy's style is very wrong for my fighter. Yeah. Because Fury's awkward, very, very awkward to fight against. But this guy's awkward as well, which is why Fury struggled. I do believe if Fury fought him again, Fury would hands down probably beat him, because Fury's that type of fighter that he just improves if there's a second fight. We've seen it with Wilder. But this guy's awkward, man. I was watching the fight and I was like, this guy's gonna be tough to beat.
You can't really pin him down, can you?
You can't.
I feel like obviously the likes of Joshua would get rid of him, but it would be tough for Joshua to get rid of him. Maybe it would be a late stoppage. But if you're looking at all the other players in the division, your Dillian Whites, your Ortizes, your Joe Joyces as well, a lot of them would go to a close decision with Otto Wallin just because of his style. And I think he's an improving fighter as well. I don't think he's got the power to really kind of, really kind of stake a claim against the top heavyweights, but we've seen against Tyson Fury that he can take it to places that you don't want to go. He can
hang in there. I personally think the best fight to make would be him versus Caballel, the guy that was meant to fight Fury at the back end of last year. You'll know more about where Caballel is, the guy that beat Derek Chisora in Monaco a few years ago, and you'll know more about where Otto Wallin is. Because I'm just telling you, man, just watching him, there's something about him that I don't think these heavyweights are going to like. But
definitely,
of course, look, we'll find out more as time goes on. Great victory for him. It puts him in a very good position. And if you can't get Chisora fighting the likes of the Joseph Parkers or the Joe Joyces, maybe that's a potential fight you might want to make. Chisora versus Otto Wallin. Otto Wallin might fancy the winner of Junior Farr versus Joseph Parker. That's how exciting this division, this heavyweight division is right now. You can make a number of fights. So now it is the final topic of the podcast, because the problem, Adrien Broner returned on Saturday night after 2 years out of the ring, got a unanimous decision win against Jovanie Santiago. I'm going to say this, right? The sport needs Adrien Broner. Whether you like him, whether you don't like him, we all love what Tyson Fury is all about. We all love that funny character. We all love Derek Chisora's unpredictability. This is why I like having Adrien Broner around. 1 minute he's humble, the next minute he's not. But you don't know what you're going to get with him. But again, returned after a long layout, did what he had to do. But can the kid really hang? Has he got one last hurrah in him?
You know what? About billions, about bullshit. I don't know which one you want to call him.
It's about billions.
I love Broner, man. Like, Broner he's going to turn heads. He's going to make you turn on your TV. And I think it's tough for me to say, because obviously I follow him on Instagram. I follow him quite closely. And obviously the last couple of years, he's just been doing absolute nonsense. Like, he's been in the clubs, he's been with strippers, he's been doing everything, you name it. And I think he's got the skill, no doubt. He's a 3-weight world champion.
Four-weight world champion.
So you got to put respect on his name. And I know he's had some tough losses, but the guy can box. And I think he struggles with his punch output. And I think he does like to kind of come into fights at defensive and counter punch. And obviously kind of in the lower divisions, he was knocking a lot of guys out because he's got the power. But I think now he just needs to kind of make the biggest fights possible, sell them, because everyone's going to watch with Broner, and just stay disciplined, because that's one thing with him. He finds it hard to stay disciplined, to stay on it all the time and live the life of a boxer, because I think before the fight, it was supposed to be at 140, but it ended up at being at 147.
Yeah, weight issues. Well, that's again 2 years out of the ring. That's what it does to you.
And then he says, "Oh, so why didn't you make weight?" And he was like, "It's nothing. We'll make it next time." And it's just like, well, you know what? I just love bro. He's hilarious, and he's so shameless. It's oh, AB man.
I don't fuck with you. He goes. 98% of my Twitter followers hate me. He goes, I don't fuck with him. He's a character. And the most annoying thing about it is the talents there as well, as you just mentioned. Four-weight world champion. But you know, it is Montell, right? These fighters these days need to be seen as role models. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing, but he's not been a role model to the younger generation, which is what the sport is going to be all about. We want to see the next crop of talent coming through. But I look at Adrien Broner outside the ring. He reminds me of Billy Joe Saunders. Always up to mischief. I mean, if you could pick to go on a night out with two boxers, they'd be my number one, number two choice, Broner and Billy Joe Saunders. Because one, they'll either get you bottled, or two, they'll either get you arrested, or three, I don't know. They'll fight each other. But look, the point I wanted to make is, right, he needs a serious figure around him. He needs someone that's going to say to him, right, knuckle down, get into the gym, work hard, train hard, eat and live the sport, and let's see what we can get out of you, because he's only 31 years old. And I don't believe he's had that iconic figure. I mean, I don't know whether he was with Floyd Mayweather or not. They
went together, but they're associates.
Yeah. He just needs stability. He needs someone. I mean, again, it's kind of embarrassing saying it for a 31-year-old professional boxer who's been a 4-weight world champion, that's fought some of the biggest names in the sport, but he needs someone that's going to just keep him on a leash and just say, look, cut your crap out outside of the ring, take the sport serious. If you're not going to take it serious, leave it. Because again, opportunities are limited these days because of this whole coronavirus pandemic bullshit. He should be thankful that he's getting these opportunities, but the sport needs him. But the sport also wants to see the guy be successful. Now, I was sat down today, and me personally, right about now, I think the perfect fight to make is him versus Amir Khan. I would love to see him fight Amir Khan. That was a fight that was brewing a few years ago after the, I don't know if you've ever seen the clip of him coming together with Guerrero and Amir Khan after the Pacquiao Mayweather fight. And he said to Amir Khan, pull out the Chris Algieri fight and fight me. And Amir Khan goes, yeah, I'll pull out. Never happened. Politics in boxing, we'll leave it for another day. But I would love to see Broner versus Amir Khan, because where does Amir Khan go next, and where could Adrian Broner potentially go next? They both make a lot of money as well at the fight.
That's a huge fight, and I haven't even thought about that fight. And I think obviously, if you're looking at it from a competitive point of view / standpoint, it was a lot bigger 3 or 4 years ago. But looking at it now, it still sells, it still does numbers, and it's a 50-50 fight because they are both past it. Let's be honest, they are both past it. Like past their best days. They're still quality fighters, quality operators, but they are past their best. And I think, yeah, man, like bring it on. They're the fights that we need to see, because a lot of boxers are kind of, they're hovering before their retirement and they're inactive and we don't know what they're doing. And I think they're kind of just waiting for that big fight. But you know, with Broner will call out anyone, it'll badmouth anyone. And he's gonna do numbers no matter what. But I would have loved to see him fight in England, to be fair. I would have loved to see Broner come to England and really kind of destroy everyone in the press conference.
It's a case of whether anyone wants to take a gamble on him. You got to give credit to Al Heyman and Showtime for getting him on their platform. It's good to see him back in the sport, but it's just a case of whether it's, I don't know, for a couple of paydays or just to keep his name relevant. I would love to see him in some of these 50-50 fights.
He flipped $13 to 13 million on Saturday night.
Well, is it? I mean, he did say that he only had $13 in his account a few weeks ago, but did he really generate $13 million from that fight?
Oh,
did he really, with no audience? It wasn't pay-per-view. You know, the co-main event was Wallin versus Breazeale. You know, a lot of people didn't make a lot of fuss about the whole card. I did, because I'm a boxing fanatic. I watch all the boxing, and I know you do as well. But come on, Adrian, you know, you're trying to kid you. We know how the sport works. We're not dummies. I don't fuck with you.
He's a gas bag, man. That's what I love about him. He just chat shit. I love it.
Do you know what? He's the type of guy that you want in your university lectures, or the type of guy you want to sit next to at work, or the type of guy that you want to bump into the pub after a hard week at work. He definitely is a character, but I'll throw it back at him. I'd love to see him fight Amir Khan. I just think he would wind Amir Khan up so much. And listen, there's a lot of things about Amir Khan's personal life that he would probably bring up as well. I'm not going to say anything because it's not my place to say. But he would wind Amir Khan up a lot, and he is entertaining, and this is what you want to see. You know what? Fuck it. O'Hara Davies versus Adrian Broner. Two of the biggest trash talkers in the game. Why not? Forget the fight. Pay him a couple of minutes just to have a 20-minute press conference. I'm telling you, man, listen, it sells. The hits on YouTube. I'll do it on this channel if it was possible. But no, honest question.
Yeah, reach out to them, man.
My days of reaching out to these fighters are long gone, Montell. Before we wrap it up, what's he capable of achieving? Let's be honest. 2 years out the ring, wasn't the greatest performance, but still got the win. Where can he go from here?
Well, I said a few years ago that he wouldn't be able to make 135. He wouldn't be able to make 140. He should stay fighting at 147 because obviously he's past 30 now, and making those type of weights when you obviously your muscle is kind of wearing off, and you are increasing in weight, and you're not looking after yourself properly. It's hard. I don't think he can. I personally don't think he's got a world title in him. I think he's had a very good career, and he can make some good money and some big fights with some names that are around the 147 division. But I don't think he's got a world title left in him. But he probably will get a fight, though. He probably will get a fight.
I think he's got one run left in him, but don't, as in run to. at 140. But when I say run, I don't mean a run and get the world title. I mean, I think he's got another world title run left in. It's kind of like Edge in WWE. He's got one run left in him, but I don't think he will. You know what I mean? But still, I do think there's one last push in him, but I don't see him winning a world title.
What would Josh Taylor or Ramirez do to Broner right now?
It'd be illegal, but
that's what you've got to ask yourself.
I'm saying it now, man. Put him in, put someone in that's going to just sit him down, you know, humble him a little bit, make him work hard, make him eat and live the sport. Because the talent is there, you know, the success is there. We're not talking about a washed up boxer. We're talking about a boxer that's been a world champion in 4 different weights. So the guy can do it. The guy can attract big fights. And again, you know, like I said, if he knuckled down and he really took it serious, it'd be really interesting to see what he's capable of achieving. But is it going to happen? I highly doubt it because of his figure. And I agree with you. I love his personality. I think he's hilarious. You're just sat there thinking, what are you going to say next? You don't know what he's capable of. I mean, I remember the press conference with Freddie Roach and Manny Pacquiao, some of the stuff he's coming out with. You're just thinking, oh my God, if you said that in public to someone, you would get battered for saying it. But that's the type of figure he is, and we need that in boxing.
Yeah, man, he's raw, he's uncut, he's from the hood. And you know, he just said it how it is, man. That you gotta love Broner for who he is, man. You wouldn't want him to change because you know, as soon as he tries to change, he's gonna be back on his bullshit about bullshit.
I personally don't think I'd hold it together if I ever interviewed him. I would just probably hold the microphone just laughing. that's how I view him. He's an entertaining character. But listen, Montell, that's all we've got time for today on podcast 28. Thank you very much for jumping on with us. A pleasure as always. We'll be sure to share your social media links in our description, and hopefully you'll join us for podcast 29, where we talk a bit about Canelo and Yildirim and Joseph Parker and Junior Far. We've got some more big boxing action returning as well. You know, we've got Frank Warren's first show of the year as well. Which fight's really getting you excited for as we move on with this year's boxing?
Ooh, so for me, I'd say I'm looking forward to obviously White Povetkin. I would say Canelo Yildirim, but I feel like that's going to be, you know, straightforward fight. What else would I say? I think Joyce versus Usyk as well. I think that's the fight I'm kind of really like, yeah.
There's only one fight I want to see, that's Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. No, I'm joking. Fury Joshua. That fight needs to hurry up and happen so I can run down to the bookies and place a chip down. I'm joking. But that's the fight we all want to see. That's the fight that I'm most excited for. And of course, if all depending on Canelo does come through Yildirim, Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders, I actually do believe that's the night where we will see Canelo take an L on his record. But yeah, Montell, much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining us for podcast 28, and to the viewers out there, if you haven't already, please hit that like, subscribe, and please make sure you leave us a comment as well in the comment section, and don't forget to follow us on all the social media platforms. Montell, Devante, Lowe, thank you very much for your time. I'm Faisal Khan, and thank you for listening to podcast 28 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.